Hello, welcome, good evening. Thank you, all of you who are joining us, for everyone who's streaming with us tonight live for our podcast. This is Shop Talk Live. I am Nicole Lossie, and today we are going to be talking with some of the team behind Dramashop's latest production, which is part of our staged reading series, The Pleasure Trials. And this is an extra special creative conversation because not only do we have some of those team members, we have some of our cast, we have our crew, we have our director, our lovely and local team, but we will also be joined by the playwright of the show herself, Sarah Saltwick. So, a little housekeeping before we jump into that. Those of you watching live on Facebook or YouTube, you can submit your questions in the comments. We're going to hold some space for those questions, as well as questions from our cast and our team if they would like to ask Sarah Saltwick directly. So, whether you've seen the show already this past weekend, we had 2 staged readings over the weekend, but then we have 2 more. So, if you're making plans for this weekend, we have 2 more staged readings of the Pleasure Trials, March 31st and April 1st. And Dramashop staged readings are always pay what you can for admission. We are doing our best to make live, engaging theater accessible for everyone. So we appreciate all of you who are choosing to go on this creative journey with us. So thank you very, very much. And thanks for hanging out tonight. We really appreciate it. So real quick too, before we start a spoiler-free kind of catch up on the Pleasure Trials, we see Rachel and Callie start clinical trials on their new female libido enhancement drug, and willing participants come out of the woodwork looking for an internal revolution. Quickly after the first dose, the effectiveness of the medicine is undeniable, but the overwhelming pressure for its success may corrupt the experiment and everyone involved. And of course, this is written by Sarah Saltwick. She is joining us tonight. She's a playwright based in Austin, Texas. She's a graduate of the Michener Center for Writers at UT Austin. She was a Jerome Fellow at the Playwright Center in Minneapolis. Some recent Austin productions include A Perfect Robot at the Vortex, nominated for 3 Austin Critic Table Awards and 6 B. Iden Payne Awards, Responsible in Out of Ink at Hyde Park Theater, and Tender Rough, Rough Tender as a rude fusion project at the Off Center. And Tender Rough, Rough Tender was awarded the David Mark Cohen Award for Best New Play by the Austin Critics Table, among other honors and credits, and we're thrilled that she's joining us tonight. Also joining us tonight is our director, Brittany Lee, Abby McCauley, our stage manager, and as well as actors in the cast, Alicia Olivar, who is portraying Callie Young, Rosie Pregler-Hitt, our narrator, and Sharon Newport, our Dr. Rachel Milan. So I would love to welcome everyone to the stream. I'm going to bring everyone in here, and here we are. Here's everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Oh, thank you. Well, Sarah, I would love to start with you and kind of then toss this up for everyone to discuss. We talked a little bit off stream about how Dramashop's whole vision is theater in process. That's our whole existence. It centers around what brings us not only to the final product, but really, focusing on that process itself. So I'd love to ask if you could start us off by telling us a little bit about when you set out to begin your creative process and your writing. What is it like to bring something like the Pleasure Trials to life? Where do you begin, and then what does something look like in process for you?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. So this is one of those questions. I love hearing writers and artists talk about their process because it feels so mysterious, and it feels mysterious to me. And I think one of the things you see in the Pleasure Trials is some of the characters' desire to get things right, to get things perfect, to really have control. And that is something I struggle with. So my creative process is a blend of trying to get quiet, get curious, be patient, let ideas come to the page without judging them, sort of go down rabbit holes, open, narrative doors, see what's possible. Like the sort of best case scenario is that I have some like quiet, low stakes time with a first draft. And that first draft probably comes from a question or an image or a curiosity, and maybe a few things crashing together that seem like they don't belong. I was a long time ago sort of a failed actress, and I have always loved theater, but I didn't like performing, but I really liked rehearsal. And I liked the process of making theater and of being part of that group. So in that first couple of drafts, I'm really trying to listen and see what might come out for the characters. And see where the play might go. And I'm often motivated by something I'd like to see on stage, whether that's a certain theme, whether that's an experience, whether that's something visual. And that's sort of a fun place to be if I can stay in that, open creative space. And then there's the revision, which could be like pretty brutal of like trying to figure out where things add up, what's missing, what's repeating, making some hard choices. And then there's like the next stage, which can be even more brutal, which is like getting it to people and finding opportunities for it to meet its audience. And that's where so much of that work is also done. I love being in a rehearsal room. I mean, I think actors and directors and designers ask different questions of a play than the playwright can ask of itself. So, and they bring such a unique perspective in. And it's this mix of logic of, okay, if you have one actor who's playing 10 different characters, and some of those characters, there's a really quick change. What do we need to signal that this is a new character? What's that essential costume piece of this new character? To sort of like, okay, we're hearing this sort of mystical sound. I'm working on another play where there's a cloud, and we have so many discussions of like, okay, what does a cloud sound like? And how can it sound different? And it's like, those are just conversations I feel so lucky to be part of. And like, it feels like such a reward for like sitting alone with this story, trying to like entice it to come out, and then, getting it strong, and then sort of road testing it with the designers and the performers, and then getting to share it with audiences and knowing that each audience member is going to have their own unique experience through the piece.
Wow. Now, how long, you talked about the time it takes before anyone else even sees it ever, when it's just you pulling out those stories. How long do you find, is there a standard amount of time before you'll let someone maybe see a piece, or is it less time-based and more like, when do you know you're ready to start having other people ask some of those questions that you might not be asking yourself?
So I wrote the Pleasure Trials pretty quickly. I wrote it during the Jerome Fellowship, the sort of first stage. And I knew there was an opportunity to get it in a rehearsal room setting with a group of actors. So it was probably about 6 months between those, sort of like first putting words on page. I was part of a writer's group, so I was sort of sharing different pages and having a rehearsal process. That was about 10 years ago. So then there's been lots of like returning to the play, making some changes, taking time away, returning, making time changes. So it can be short if the opportunity presents itself. And that's pretty great. Like, it's very energizing to get new perspectives on. It really depends on what opportunities present.
Sure. And that process can look so different from piece to piece. And I mean, obviously from artist to artist too. So Brittany, I would love to bring you in and ask a little bit about, you heard what Sarah was talking about with her process of starting that. And you've worked across a lot of different mediums, you've live streamed on Twitch, you're doing, your video pieces and things, and now working in live theater too, which this is not your first, live theater experience, but how does that creative process kind of compare when you're looking to create? Where do you begin, and where does that process go for you?
I feel like my answer is like complete opposite from what Sarah said, because like I don't spend time with something and like let it sit and let it speak to me. I like hit the ground running. We pound out. We see what we can get. I talk to a bajillion different people. I'm like, okay, what do you have to give me? What do you have to give me? What do you have to say? What do you have to say? And so like I go at it as chaotically as possible, I think, is how I approach my stuff these days. Specifically because I do have experience in a lot of different mediums. So I find that my success comes with letting the people who are collaborating with me, who are more familiar with that medium, tell me what the piece needs of its own. Even in my video work too, like even if I'm kind of spearheading a majority of the production, when I get to the part that I'm working with other people, I'm like, all right, now you tell me. So that's the like really exciting thing for me, is to always be like, okay, I have a vision, but my vision isn't correct because everybody else has a piece of this puzzle. And so they, with the collaboration, they get to tell me what I'm missing. And I find that like really fun and engaging. But live theater is a whole different beast than pretty much anything else I do, because it is live and it's long form. I do a lot of short form things. I do a lot of things that are very quick turnaround or very short in terms of length, and like don't spend a lot of time in it. And granted, this is short form for Dramashop because it's a stage reading. So we had 6 rehearsals. So like not very long in terms of just general live theater. But for me, that was ages. That was ages for us to sit down and be like, okay, so what do these characters think? How do they feel? What are they responding to in this situation? Why are they responding this way? And I don't usually get that opportunity because I tend to kind of come at something with a vision and an aesthetic first and then get to be like, okay, and this is why after. Whereas with this process, we got to sit down and be like, why? And then that created the vision at the very end. And a lot of choices I made for design, I put design in quotes because like it's a stage reading. We didn't do a lot of any kind of flamboyant anything, which is good, which is I think the point for us to be able to hear the text. But the design choices I made were after the cast had made their choices. So they informed me of what the show needed to go from there.
Sure. No, I love hearing the comparing and contrasting too. And I want to move a little bit into like subjects and themes too, but with everyone else that we have our, our actors and our stage manager too. Does anyone else want to chime in at all about what was the process for you of taking something like this, the pleasure trials, and then bringing it to the stage? Whether it's, if you want to talk about specifically with this one being a staged reading or just your process as an actor, what are some steps that you like to take?
I think with this piece in particular, our first rehearsal was more like a therapy session, and it was just so cathartic because it's such a relatable piece. I think across the board, no matter how you describe yourself as a woman or your sexuality, or even how complicated or different your gender might be. We've all lived that shared experience, and I think that informed a lot of the character choices made by Shar, Alicia, and Adele. It was imbued with just so much personal experience that I think audiences have really connected with that.
That's excellent. Thank you, Rosie.
I think I may have been the only one that actually worked with everyone before. I had experience with everyone on the cast as well as Brittany and Abby. And so I just kind of came in and it felt so comfortable and it felt so, there was so much feminine energy. There was so much acceptance and just like, let's talk. And let's talk about what it means to us. Let's talk about if there's anything in this that is particularly triggering or particularly anything, if anything gives you any sort of strong emotional reaction, let's talk about it. And to be able to do that and to be able to get so deep into conversations about what's going on with these characters has just been insane. Like, it's just been amazing, especially for a staged reading with such a limited rehearsal time to get this deep, but it's been just an amazing experience.
Wow. And you talked about bringing up, what are some potential subjects, that you'd want to discuss from the beginning to make everyone feel comfortable into. And I want to talk a little bit about like subjects and themes and come back to you, Sarah, if I can, talking about like themes that you write about. Are there sorts of, or is there a type of theme or a type of character? Is there a quality in a subject matter or character that you are really drawn to in your writing more so than anything else? Is there a common thread that draws you back to create?
It depends a little bit on the particular play. I have written a couple of plays that deal with sort of science and exploration, dipping a little bit into sort of science fiction, the way science works in the pleasure trials is a little like accelerated. It's a little theatrical science, and A Perfect Robot, that had a beautiful production here in Austin, is also sort of theatrical science, which is like stealing some science and then spinning some story out of it. I like complicated characters, I like complicated female characters, and I think I'm really curious about people who are very good at their job and that's not enough. So people who are working very hard and still searching for something, that sort of drive shows up a lot in different plays. And then people who maybe see the world, who have just have a curiosity and wonder about the world. that is a character that I enjoy writing quite a bit. And I recently, I have a 4-year-old daughter now, and it's very interesting. And I don't really have a sense of how she is changing like the themes of my writing, but the way she attacks the world with like her curiosity and passion is really inspiring. And so I know that sort of like vibrancy is going to show up in my writing, especially as I have more perspective as she gets a little older. Yeah. And I like to write about love. I like to write about sort of major relationships. And I think there's some really tangled love stories inside the pleasure trials, both romantic and platonic, and love at work, and sort of like boundary crossing love, but all that feels rich and dangerous and impactful to me.
Wow. Well, that's a beautiful wide gambit of all the things to cover. That's I love that. Brittany, I want to kind of do the same as we did at first. A similar question for you: are there certain types of content, subject matter, types of characters that you read or see or create yourself that you find and you just say, yes, that's something that I have to do?
Yeah, complete opposite from this play, almost entirely. Like it's really funny because I think I've told the cast this, like, this is probably the most serious, long form, character driven thing I've done in a really long time, because I typically do comedy pieces that are like bits. They're not anything serious. They're not even like comedy commentary. It's just like, how can I be absurd in 5 minutes on screen? And if it was a challenge, it was like 100% a challenge, but I'm gravitated towards, like, as an overall artist from my entire span of my career, I'm gravitated towards, stories that I feel like are representative of people who don't feel like they get to see themselves in stories. So well-rounded characters, 100%, and, characters who just aren't typically center stage, no matter if that's gender, sexuality, race, whatever that is, some kind of character who, in the grand scheme of kind of how we consume entertainment, is not the main kind of character. Lately, the past couple of years, I've just been doing a lot of comedy stuff. So when I was asked to do this show, it was like, you know what, I'll take on the challenge. And being able to kind of develop these characters with the cast as real people was like what really drove me, because again, I don't get that opportunity very much. I'm making caricatures of things that are supposed to be funny and silly, and go in the opposite direction to say, okay, let's make these real people that have real problems that are trying to go through life, is like really, like, so left field for me. But apparently it's also not, which is really funny, because I don't have an outside perspective of my own work. I think I know what I like to do, but I don't know what people see my work as. And when I was approached, like, I got a laundry list of like, oh, all these things you do and you like. And I'm like, do I? So, like, you know, feminist kind of like commentary, and a whole cast of the characters are all women, and like that kind of like, and unique, and kind of, which is what's also, I was thinking about this too, is this is also a science show. I'm not a science person. This is the second science show I've directed at Dramashop.
I was just thinking that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like maybe science is kind of becoming the theme for some of my work. But I think my themes that I like to follow are, is it unique, and is it something that people who don't get to see themselves center stage will get to see themselves in, regardless of if it's super comedy or super serious. I still think that range is what I try to aim for, because at the end of the day, it's a selfish endeavor. I want to see myself on stage and on screen and in podcasts, and like, so what can I do to make that happen? Because nobody else is doing it, I might as well do it myself. So that's kind of like the general, like, big umbrella, and then it kind of goes further down.
No, and it's interesting to me too that you said at the beginning, well, it's opposite of what, Sarah said, but you're both talking about that range. You're both, coming at it from a point of, it might be a different range, but it's still, making it a wide net to kind of find places in your niches to kind of carve out. I'd love to turn a little bit more back to the actors again too. And if someone would like to start, or I'll call on folks to make not uncomfortable for somebody jumping in. But I was interested in talking through, especially with Sarah here, so if she could respond to what you might have thought was the most challenging part of this process and production for each of you. Is there anyone who feels strongly to start? Like I said, if not, I'll go around the screen, but. See, Rosie, you volunteered first. Can I come back to you as something? What was something, even if not the most challenging, but something that was challenging that you found about, doing this show or even doing a staged reading of it?
Yeah, speaking to that stage reading aspect, as the narrator, I feel like it's my duty to take the audience on that journey and help paint the picture for them, especially since it's not a staged version. So really creating that atmosphere. But with that being said, I found it very difficult to create that atmosphere because in my mind, there's a million different ways this could be staged. Oh, maybe these actors are closer in this part, or they're separated, or how minimal is the set? Is it literally on stage? Are we literally in a lab, or is it just sort of the idea of one? And that all depends on the director and the set design, resources, all of those things. But it was really great to lean back not only on Britty's vision of making this very intimate and real, but also leaning on the performances of my fellow actors as well, helped to flesh out the world. And we sort of discovered our way together through the darkness, hand in hand.
Absolutely. Shar?
I think Rachel went on such a huge journey through this. And I related a lot to it, but I also found it really challenging to, she starts out as this, by the book, everything's got to be to the letter exactly, very sciencey kind of person. By the way, Britty, I think you get science stuff because you kind of give a mad scientist energy, just so you know. But she's very by the book, scientific method, kind of irritated by Callie, kind of, and then there's this dance that she does with Callie where they kind of trade places, and she becomes the warm, fuzzy, touchy-feely person. And I just think that for myself as a human, as a woman, I think that's a journey we all have to take, where we come to the realization that, you know what, I don't want to play by their rules anymore, and I don't want to fit in anymore. And all those hoops that I jumped through before are just stupid. And I don't know why I jumped through them, and I don't want to do that anymore. And so it was a really lovely journey for me. It was very challenging as an actor and personally to go through that journey because it was very personal for me.
That feels like a theme that I've felt from a lot of you, is talking about it feeling very personal. I feel like that's a unique thing to hear from actors participating in, even a staged reading of something, to get to that point in the process where it becomes that for you too. Alicia, is there anything, acting and performing in this that you found was a challenge for you?
Oh, yes, so much. A part of it, I was actually reflecting that I hadn't done anything besides either a comedy or a comedic role in a long time. So that portion of it was also really difficult for me. I felt like I had put a lot of pressure on myself to do well, whatever that means. And another thing, I also related a lot to this character. And I know that Rachel, Dr. Milan, goes on this cathartic journey of release, whereas Callie kind of goes on the opposite, which is kind of difficult to go along with her on, because you yourself kind of want that release. So it was kind of difficult being her for a little bit, fitting into, I guess, a societal box of some sort. And also relating to her ambition, and partially wishing that I had that ambition, or to the courage to follow through with my own ambition. So yeah, those parts.
That's excellent. Thank you. I spoke with everybody else too, but Abby, I want to talk to you about some of the tech side of a staged reading is obviously very different than maybe some of the other productions that we've all participated in too. Is there something that stands out to you trying to execute some of that piece that was a challenge working through this?
Honestly, it was a very different experience. I've never done any work with a stage reading at all ever. So this was my very first one. So I wouldn't say it was difficult, but just learning how to get into the flow of it not being a like go 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 go.
Sure.
And it was more of like they use intimate a lot because it is, and it's more slow, and it's like a building process, which was very new to me. I've never done anything like that in a production before, so that was very exciting and new. And just being emotional support for all these amazing people.
And that's good. That's definitely a needed part of the team for sure. Sarah, I would love to come back to with talking a little bit about themes earlier too, but with the pleasure trials and some of the actors kind of spoke to this too. We go through some of the themes surrounding, you mentioned, desire, success, guilt, joy, vitality, all these words, that we've kind of thrown. What do you hope, looking at some of, whether it's a big theme like that, or if it's something, a minuscule detail, is there something specific that you hope the audience or the reader in the case walks away with them?
Yeah, I mean, this play really grew out of like my own frustrations and baggage with my own sexual desire. Like it is also a very personal play in that way for me of where it began. And I've now had the gift of like watching performances of this play and thinking like, oh, I'm being so hard on myself. Like thinking like I'm broken, or like, where's this pill that's going to fix everything? And it's like, it's fun to sort of be in that imaginary space and to sort of like imagine what those kind of chemicals might do or what that would unlock. But and this touches on the play is, one of the things this libido drug is giving the participants is this permission to explore, to be curious, to be accepting of parts of themselves, to like listen to their own desires in a different way. And it's, one of the questions too when you meet these participants is like, are they on it? Or are they on the placebo? And I think it's an interesting thing for an audience member to think about, like, would I take this drug? What would happen? What would happen if I had like this little nudge? Like, what desires might come out? But also I hope that there's like a little kindness too to themselves of saying like, I'm okay. Also, there's a fluidity and a variety to a person's sexual desires, and a curiosity about the people you may be in relationship with, about like where their desires are, and thinking of it less like a line and more in different shapes or something that ebbs and flows. So I think just like different, I hope an audience has a different sense of like picturing desire, both for others and for themselves. And like, I hope, if you're in the mood to kiss people, you're like kissing people more. Like, I hope there's a little like fun and flirty energy that comes from the play eventually. I mean, it goes a lot of different places, but like there's part of me that's like, I think this would be a good date play. Like, I think you'll have some good conversations afterwards.
Absolutely. I mean, I love that idea of all of it, but the not being so hard on yourself, that's because whether it's in the form of something because of desire, something because of just in your own life, you talked about being really good at your job and having that not be enough. Like that's so relatable for a lot of people too. But I like that of just like not being so hard on yourself, no matter what the thing is that you're, poking at. And on the same takeaway kind of idea, I'll come back to Brittany and our Dramashop team. How does that compare with when you were working through this piece? What were your hopes for the audience to take away with them after they saw your reading of it?
That's a really good question. We talked about this, I think, in one of the rehearsals of like what I was hoping the audience would get from it. And I think the biggest thing that we talked about was that I was hoping that the audience would start to think about women's desires, because they're like, the conversation is not even started, I think, in a lot of circles of people, of like allowing yourself to see women as people with like just human desires and also sexual desires in the same capacity that men are allowed to have. Because we talked a lot about like, this is a, you know, fantasy of a libido pill for women, but I can tell you right now that there's a libido pill for men, right? And so like, we already have these things happening, and so the conversations aren't even started, because I think that there's a lot of societal expectations for what women are expected to do, even in the circumstances of where we're at now, right? Like, we are not in a time where women can't vote and, you know, all this. Like, we're at a time where we're still fighting for things, for sure. Like, obviously women are paid less in the workforce, but it's not significant enough for people to notice it, right? So it's a societal set thing, and all the pressures of like, well, women don't get hired as much in higher positions, and et cetera onwards. But because it's so, everything's so like soft, I guess is the word I'm thinking of. Like, you know, women can have their own credit cards now, right? Like, so there's a lot of things that's like, everything's even. But do you think about what is expected of women in society versus men as like cultural things? And so I wanted to start those gears turning in people's heads of like, what do I ask of the women in my life without asking? And what do I expect of them versus like, do I give them the space for them to have their own desires? And that we also talked a lot about like how a lot of women or folks who were societally raised women don't allow themselves to have desires and wants and needs because of how the societal expectations of it are. So there was a lot of, I think, in our rehearsals, because it turned into therapy for everybody, of like being like, oh, I'm allowed to want something, right? Like that, and obviously not as big as that, but there was just a lot of conversations about that. And so my hope, my hope was that even if the audience walked away from it being like, oh, interesting, that was a unique way of looking at women's sexuality, it still started those gears turning in their head of like, how much of this, how much do women not say because of the expectations in life. So that was my hope, because, you know, I think that there's a lot to be said about women's sexuality and exploring that, but I also think that there's a lot to be said about women's desire in life, and we don't get that opportunity to even talk about that.
Mm-hmm. No, it's interesting to bring that up too. And you talked about, you know, the things that appear to be even, or that appear to be,
Right.
you know, like, oh yeah, it's fine. Like, solved that, checked that box, but that there's still so much room to have those conversations and to not settle, and I think there's some themes of that in here too, of like, you can say, okay, that's enough, but being allowed and having the permission to say, well, I know I'm enough, or I want to feel like I'm enough, but like, I can ask for more from people around me, from society around me, from just everyone we're dealing with every day, and kind of reopen that box a little bit to say like, no, we didn't have to shut it and say, good, we accomplished it, we solved it. Like, because it's not a box to check. It's not. I mean, there's so many things that are so much more complicated than that. And Alicia, it actually made me think of your bio when you wrote about, yes, specifically, you were writing about this piece is poignant and important discussion that you hope the audience will continue to engage in after the house lights come up. And that stuck with me when we were putting some of the press together. It seemed like you all had a very similar feeling of that, of just, we know we do this kind of work because we want to tell a story and start a conversation. Yes, but this piece stuck out to me even in the last few years of things that we've done at Dramashop, of like, it's coming out and asking you to start that conversation and saying like, I'm not suggesting you do it. I'm like, you're going to go home and keep talking about this. And I don't know if anyone wants to talk about some of what we were talking about before. If not, we can move on. But just someone brought up that, you had folks coming up to you 2 days later after seeing one of the productions this weekend saying, maybe this didn't mean what I thought it meant because there was something deeper here and we're talking about it. But is there anything else anyone wanted to add to that end?
I've had some feedback from, I've only at this point had feedback from men that I know that have seen it, and all of them have had the same reaction of, we're still talking about it the next day, we're still talking about it 2 days later. We never thought of it that way, we never looked at it that way. And I personally, I don't even remember the line where Callie says, it's my pleasure, to the one male, voice that we have in the play. And a friend of mine who is male said, she said, it's my pleasure. It's not her pleasure. And it just struck me as so funny, but so true, that pleasure and desire are such loaded words, and we use them flippantly, but they're really given special treatment in this play. And I want every man that sees it to really sit down and have a conversation about it with a man or a woman, or with someone in his life that he feels like he can get vulnerable with, because I think it's a really, really important conversation that has to be had.
Sort of going off of that, there are definitely women I know in my life that I wish would come see the show, but they might be so uncomfortable with the topic they can't even imagine themselves coming to see it. And I think that there are some of the people that need that permission to even begin to explore who they might be and what they might want to do with their lives, and discover who they are as an individual, outside of a family unit or a friend group or any other, social identifiers.
I just wanted to jump on what Rosie said. And one of the things that we talked about in rehearsal was about whether or not you can give yourself permission to be a wholly realized person, and what that desire actually means. So that was another very important part of the piece to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, you all clearly had a lot of good conversation. I'm sorry, Sarah, were you going to jump in there? I don't want to step on you.
Oh, I just, it's really wonderful to hear the conversations y'all had. They're just like so within the world of the play and my curiosities. But just for folks listening who haven't seen the play yet, I want to be clear. The characters in the play are working on figuring this out, and they make mistakes, and they, this is like like you are continuing the conversation that the characters are having and navigating. So it is not a play where people have figured things out, which I also have like a tenderness for it, even though some nights I'm just like, why are you doing this? That is a mistake. That was the wrong choice.
Well, clearly it's causing a lot of conversation, which is awesome. So I want to make sure I leave some time for any questions that, our cast and our crew has as well. But while you all are thinking of that, and our director and stage manager, while you're thinking of questions, if you don't have them already, we have a couple from a couple people who are watching on our live stream. So we have one first from Instagram, from Howard Lang, and it's for Sarah, asking, could you recount some of your experience working with Stephen Dietz? Has his work impacted yours?
Sure. Stephen Dietz was one of my professors at UT. He was a great teacher. I consider him a personal friend, and he's if you're a writer and have a chance to take a masterclass with him, I would highly recommend it. One of his sort of writing adages is about like, get in late, get out early, of like, really, of like, what is the core of this scene? What is the essential part of this story? What is even the essential part of this line? And really believing in a living play. And like, one of the things he likes, my cat is just like, really wants to be in this. He talks a lot about sort of reversals or status shifts. And I came into playwriting in a very intuitive place, very much, hearing character voices, sort of seeing images, and working with Stephen helped me become a little bit more of a technician and get into that revising and sort of strengthening my plays, especially for stage. And Stephen would say, like a playwright needs tools, not for when the writing is easy, but for when the writing is hard, and sort of like going in and trying to diagnose of like, okay, what is sticking in this scene? How can I bring this to life? Because sometimes it's alive and sometimes it's not, and you need different tools to sort of diagnose.
Mm-hmm. Tools in the toolbox. Thank you, Howard, for that question. And thank you. We have a couple others. We have one from YouTube, from our YouTube stream, from Jacqueline D. Sarah, what are some follow-up questions that you had after writing this play that you'd like to explore potentially in future works?
I think workplace dynamics is interesting. I think how people in power do or do not share power, or sort of bring up a younger person with them. There's some great comedy in pleasure trials, and it's really fun to hear an audience laugh. So that's not a question so much as a theme, but I think for giving myself permission to like embrace comedy in my work, even if there's serious topics, that's something I want to keep doing. But yeah, I think something about work, work is such a presence in our life, and again, it can create some sort of unnatural, not chosen relationships, but that have a huge impact on our life. So that's something, and I think and just desire and sexuality just feel like just questions to ask forever, that they just keep evolving and will show up in different ways in different pieces.
Absolutely. It's complicated. I'll take one more. I think we have from Facebook, from actually our previous and founding artistic director, Zach Flock, who's watching. Would love to know other playwrights who influenced Miss Saltwick, and if she has any reading suggestions. And he says, thank you for your work.
That's great. I have to think about that. I mean, so when I was as a younger writer, I really loved Naomi Wallace and, Sarah Rule. I think the way Sarah Rule writes sort of theatrical magic is very inspiring. I think Annie Baker is wonderful, and just those sort of like inexplicable, where you feel the world and you feel something shifting, but it's not quite in the text. I think reading Harold Pinter is another one where you're like, it's so clear of like, okay, people are saying things, but there's a lot they're not saying, which is just, as a writer, so good to be like reading some of those things. I haven't gotten to see it, but I really loved reading the script. I think it's the Watson Experiment, but the Madeline George play was a while ago. But and of course, Carol Churchill is a huge inspiration. But I always love a play where there's a central idea, and then it sort of spins out, and there's lots of surprises along the way, and there's sort of like repetition and evolution. There's a Carol Churchill play called Blue Heart that is pretty exceptional. It's a pair of one acts. In the first one, this scene keeps repeating, but things keep changing. And I think she's described it as, it's like the play has a virus. So it's like replicating itself, but something's breaking down. And it just feels so alive and so foreign, but also you're like, I have had days like this. I have had weeks like this where things are repeating, but things are a little bit different, and the things feel a little alien. So those are some things that come to mind.
Wow. Well, I will be sure to write all those down and put them in the show notes when we put out the podcast. So I'll take notes for anyone who was following along. Also excited to hear you say Annie Baker. I'm trying to remember, what was the last one? I think we did The Flick last year. There was an Annie Baker a show. But so I would love to now turn it back to you all on screen too, and open it up to your questions for Sarah Saltwick. It's not often that you get to, speak directly with, and we've had this opportunity tonight to ask her questions about whether it's your role, whether it's the play in general, anything about her. But I'd love to. I'll start with. Does anyone want to volunteer to start? Or if not, I'll just go around the circle here.
I do have a question. Sarah, you had mentioned about the comedic moments. Were you surprised how funny? I mean, opening night, we were floored by the crowd reaction, and we're like, oh my God, that's funny. And when we were in rehearsal, it just didn't click with us. Were you surprised at how many comedic moments were in there? Were those intentional, or was that kind of
So the very first sort of public sharing was at Amphibian Stage in Fort Worth, maybe about 6 years ago. And they also did the world premiere last year. But for that first reading, yes, I was very surprised and very happy. And then it was just like big laughs. And some of the places I was like, oh, I think there'll be a little laugh here. But then there was like big responses. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's very addicting.
Yes, it really is.
And it's a little front load, because then there's parts where it is more dramatic, but it's hard to predict too, though, when an audience is going to laugh. So I think part of what makes some of the moments funny is that it's so inside the character. I think there's definitely were drafts where I was like, I'm going to put some more jokes in. And then I had to be like, oh, I got to take them all out because I was trying too hard. So definitely a balance there.
Yeah.
That's a great question, Shar. Anybody else in our cast, or Abby or Brittany, have any specific questions we haven't talked through yet tonight?
I don't have any questions.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just was going to say, I don't have any questions because I've been thinking about this for weeks, because Sarah emailed me and said, if you have any questions, let me know. And I was sitting there like, I'm sure I'll have some. And then we're going through rehearsals and I'm like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to ask, because it's the thing about this show is I think the thing that really made me say yes to directing it is that there's so much space to explore. And I don't get that opportunity very much. And when I'm doing something of this scale, I really want to have that opportunity to be able to let actors find the character. I don't have to tell them who the character is. They get to find the character, and we get to go through this emotional arc together, even if, in this case, I got very lucky because this cast was willing to dive deep into personal relationships with the show and with each other and with themselves really quickly. But even in the context of like a show where maybe there isn't that opportunity, even if we take from step one to the final performance of saying, okay, these are characters that get to go on a journey and we get to explore that together, like that's still really important to me. So I didn't necessarily want to ask anything because I didn't want to color my own vision of what it could be with, like, I love insight, I do, but I wanted to like kind of blank slate myself so that I could let the performers make that discovery. And then I was like, okay, I'm sure I'll have something. We've discovered some stuff. I'm sure I'll have something. And then I was like, I don't have anything, because it is a good show, and it's challenging. It's a hard topic, but at the same time, it's a very important topic. It's an easy topic. Because like we all fell into it really quickly of like talking about it. And so I guess the question is, in the context of the broader sense, and I'm thinking maybe even closer to like the temperature of the country right now, of like where we're at with stuff, in the broader sense of things, how do you put aside that expectation of content to make something that you think is important? Because right now we're having, obviously the like when you wrote it is different than where we are now, but the performances are going on now. It's like, it's a touchy topic in general. Just even like, there's no way to make a synopsis of this show that doesn't make somebody upset. And so I'm just kind of curious, like how you get to that place of, you know, is it confidence? Is it just you want the show so badly to be out there? Like what got you to that point of being like, you know what, this is worth telling? And that's for you, Sarah, specifically.
I think that's a great question. And it is honest. I mean, part of that is, I think that's not my responsibility, you know? So my responsibility is to like write truthfully and to listen to the folks in the room. If they say, hey, have you thought about this? Or, hey, have you thought about this? Or like this moment of the character, especially when I'm in rehearsals, but like, and I want to take care of the audience in terms of being intentional about the choices and sort of working with the production team to create something that feels like true and authentic and interesting and exciting. And I think if you read a synopsis of a show and you think, I don't want to see that, it's okay not to see it. I've had moments where I've decided not to see shows, not so much for like sexual content, but like just sometimes you're not in a place to see a given show. And that is okay. But like, it's also worth asking yourself, like, why, what's going on, or sort of notice patterns in your art going, or in your programming going, or even in my writing going, you know, like I've now written a number of three-handers with either all female casts or like predominantly. And it's just like, oh, am I creating a little box for myself? Is it time to challenge myself in a different way? Does that mean a large cast? Does that mean, you know, one person? Like, so to be looking at those patterns, and not that it's a problem, but of like trying to complicate that. But I mean, I'm really happy you guys are doing this play in this moment. It does. And I think inviting a little controversy is good. And the people who want to see it will see it. And the people on the fence, I hope they come. And for folks who say, you know, I'm worried about X being triggering because of a personal experience, I hope they'll ask some questions. You know, I think in our theater going, we can also take care of ourselves as audience members to say, you know, if there's a specific thing you are concerned about, to ask good questions and to sort of see work that feels like just outside your comfort zone.
Wow. Well, I think, excuse me, that sounds like a perfect kind of note to take us, you know, to our end here. Is there any final thoughts? I don't want to close the door on anybody if there is, but I love that idea of us creating that space and it being kind of our responsibility as the theater putting on this to have a space where people can ask questions or can, you know, just find out, again, like you said, it's okay if you read a synopsis of a show and maybe that's not your show, but maybe it's worth asking yourself why, or asking, you know, finding the right resources to really dig into that feeling. Is there more to it? Is there something else that we can learn? So is there any final thoughts? I want to make space for that. If not, we'll say thank you to everyone and we'll start heading towards the end here. No? All right. Well, thank you all so much. Sarah Saltwick, it has been an absolute joy to speak with you. And you've just
thank
been
you guys for having me and doing this show. And yeah.
Thank you. So gracious to offer to, you know, be a part of this and to even speak with all of our team and to provide the work that you've done. We're really, really grateful. So thank you so much. And for being here tonight. Thank you to all of our cast and our director and our stage manager, all of you for being here. And just, this has been a pleasure to be a part of. Dramashop still holds a really special place in my heart. I've been, you know, with our organization for over 10 years now. And I used to be more on stage, but now I really kind of appreciate the behind the scenes tech kind of stuff and being able to have a place where I can still kind of do that and talk about great art and theater with, you know, like-minded artists and artists who aren't afraid to ask questions and do all of that is really, really, I'm grateful for that. So thank you on a personal note too. So we will have 2 more opportunities this weekend that you can see the pleasure trials. Hopefully you heard something tonight, if you're listening, that, you know, if you were on the fence, kind of put you in the mood and the mindset to come see us. We are having another stage reading Friday, March 31st, Saturday, April 1st. Both are at 8 p.m. Again, that admission is pay what you can, and all donations are welcomed and appreciated. All of what you donate furthers Dramashop's mission of providing entertainment and provocative theatrical experiences designed to challenge and engage our community. So thank you, all of you, too. Coming up, just real quick plug, we do have auditions coming up this weekend for Kingdom Come. That's going to be coming up April 1st. Nope, April 2nd and 3rd are the auditions for that. So check out dramashop.org for more information on that. And then we also have our Dramashop One Act Festival coming up, 4 original pieces by local artists that'll be going on April 21st through the 29th. You can also find all of that at dramashop.org for all of the details. So we appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. And with that, we will say goodnight. So thank you all.